So I'm now going to, rather than just get stand-up presentations, what I'm going to do is introduce these three guys, and I'm going to ask some questions and then open it up to you guys and make it very interactive. And they're going to go through, to start with, I'm going to ask them, really in this world, this real-time world, from how is that affecting, what are they doing about that in their own organisations? So if I'm going to start, so basically Sara Bennison, who is Managing Director of Marketing Communications at Barclays UK Retail Bank. Actually, Sara will describe, she's come from an agency background. And in fact, a lot of our client counsel I deliberately picked to, not only are they senior marketeers with a lot of experience, but many of them have been agency side. So they've seen how brilliant agencies can be, but also where are areas that we could evolve? What are some of the things you think slightly frustrating? Yeah, and equally seeing it from the client side. Yeah, so it's not all about agencies, it's about clients and agencies and intermediaries, the whole industry. How can we change, evolve for the better? So Sara, I'm going to kick off, and then we've got Sean Betts, who's the head of Agile Client Solutions, which we thought was a rather relevant title for this particular thread, at Havas Media, so from a media agency. And then we have Charlie Rudd, who's Managing Director of BBH, who rather coincidentally works with Sara on the Barclays account. So you'll get sort of a spread of perspectives, and then please chip in with what your questions are. So if I kick off, if that's all right with you, Sara, yeah? Yep. Really about, so go on, just tell me how, it's quite interesting, Barclays, you was a bank, right? You would have thought is quite a sort of traditional business, right? And it's probably, is it quite slow in the way it does things? That's the sort of perspective perhaps from the outside. So when I sort of asked Sara to do it from being agile, sort of thought naturally you wouldn't associate the word agile with Barclays, would you? So Sara, how's agility affecting Barclays?
I think quite a lot, and I think, well, there's 3 people I know of in the room who work on our business and sorted agencies. Are we slow? No, I don't think so. And indeed, so agile is our business having to be at the moment. You introduced me as MD of Marketing for the UK Retail Bank, which was true until 1 minute till 7 this morning, because obviously we've now reorganised everything. So I think I am of the personal and corporate bank, but who knows? So, and I think that's the kind of context, I think, from a client point of view. So digital from our business is forcing just the most massive changes. So we talk about the fact Barclays is going to be 325 years old, and we've seen this country through 2 industrial revolutions, and this is the 3rd. And it really does feel like that in the organisation, because it's just the most mammoth changes in how you do business at every level, from how you trade in an investment bank to what a branch is for, is just hugely different and is changing at incredible pace. And what's interesting from my perspective, and having been, as you said, an agency person, is the advertising industry changing at the same pace, I suppose is the question. So some bits clearly are. There are things that people do now that never would happen before. Media has changed, hugely, and the way it's bought has changed hugely. But actually some of the creative processes actually hadn't changed a huge amount at all in terms of what actually goes on in an agency. And that's, I think, where some of the challenges are coming now, and certainly some of the things that we're working on with our agencies. So as well as a lot of change around digital, clearly we've had 1 or 2 reputational challenges as an industry too. And that's kind of forced us to think about a really different engagement model with customers, as we, more than anyone, are aware of the fact that you can only build a reputation through where and how you speak and your behaviour as a brand. It can't just be through having a nice glossy 60-second ad. That's not going to fix it. And that really helped push us, I think, to be braver than perhaps you would have expected, and maybe that we would have been without a crisis to kind of push us forward around how we engage with customers. And that has fundamentally changed the model of the way that we work. So, when I started at Barclays, started the week before Lehman's collapsed. It's been one set of headlines and fun and games, whoops-a-daisy, after another. So when I started, you know, the marketing calendar was and always had been kind of 5 or 6, depending on the money, big blocks of campaigns vertically integrated a year. So, and you kind of knew what most of them were going to be, because ISAs would happen in March and April, and then you'd have a bit of mortgages, and then you'd have a bit of savings, and you know, you knew what was happening in that sense. And also, actually, the formula for financial services advertising had big rates. It was all about rates. I mean, we've all forgotten about rates, and God knows what will happen if they change the base rate. I think we've all forgotten how to do those statutory ads that you know, you used to kind of have to do. And so that was the way it worked. You sort of knew what you were talking about, and a rate message was going to be big, and you kind of knew that 5 or 6 times a year you'd be doing this. And you had a machine that was well oiled in terms of our organisation. You had agencies that knew what, and so you know, we had our crises and dramas, but it was mainly about how large the rate was and should we do it in balloons or bubbles this year. And really not a whole heap more complicated. Now it's totally different. So the way in which we plan for the year is utterly and totally different. So we still have tasks, things that we need to deliver for the business, commitments we've made in terms of what we will help the business achieve. But we don't have this kind of rhythm of, oh, well, we're doing ISAs for 2 months, and then we're doing this, and then we're doing the other. You see them as always on conversations with the customer groups that you're working with. Doesn't mean that you're not still using actually quite a similar mix of media in some ways. There's, you know, television's still really important to us, press is still really important to us, as well as some of the not so new but newer channels. So it doesn't necessarily change that, but it does change the way in which you think. And that's really where the agility bit comes in for us. So I know what I need to deliver over a year. I kind of know the media frameworks and the media partnerships I'm operating within. More or less know the creative frameworks and the creative containers that we're working with. But could I tell you what films that we're going to be making for the end of next week in terms of content? No, because we'll run every week an editorial board where you take in all the kind of things that are going on. So a couple of weeks ago, for example, when there was all the noise about mortgages and would you have to declare your manicures and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, mortgages are clearly important for us over a year, but we didn't anticipate the press reporting that story in that way. We didn't anticipate it getting as much, you know, news as it did, but you could see that coming in search terms, in what was questions coming into the press office, all those sources. And that's what you feed in and go, right, this week we're going to talk about the implications, we'll go and shoot a film, we'll do some content on the website, we'll publish it in different places. And that is just totally and utterly different, to be able to sit here and go, you know, obviously some of the things next week I know what we're doing, but some of the things, I don't know. You tell me, you'll probably have a good idea of what you think the themes are going to be. So I think that, in a kind of nutshell, kind of takes you from what's going on with us as a business. So we're working in and therefore expect others to deal with change of massive magnitude, but also changing the way in which we communicate and changing the operating structures, if you like, the structures of the business, the way we work with our agency partners, completely as a result. Does that help?
Perfect. Perfect overview. Charlie?
Yes, I feel like with those parliamentary interviews, sort of when everyone was going to go, I agree with Nick. I mean, I agree with Sara, so she's my client. So everything that Sara says, I agree. No, I think some of the changes that we're seeing, I think Sara's absolutely right though. To go to the speed at which we've changed, and I think hence the agenda is a lot slower than a lot of the clients' industries, the way they've changed. And I do think I was talking earlier that saying how Barclays has changed is, yeah, pre-2008. It was, everyone thought this was very predictable, boring, nothing ever changed, no one was interested. And suddenly it's become the most dynamic industry we work with. And exactly, we don't know what we're doing from week to week. And obviously some industries haven't changed quite as significantly, but a lot of them have changed a lot more than the advertising industry, I'd argue. And I think there's a sort of, what we observed, probably going back to about that time, 2008, 2009, we went through a restructure ourselves, and almost there were two camps of people in the agency. There were people that looked at it and went, clients just want more stuff, more work, in more channels, in less time, for less money. You know, this is a nightmare. And that is true. I think that's basically, you know, I think that is basically true. But the other way of looking at it is to go, there's never been an opportunity to do more work, get more participation, more involvement, have more impact, really see the impact of what you're doing. You know, because I mean, a lot of a lot of the worst accounts I always used to think you worked on was when you worked on something that took you 2 years to get an ad out. And, you know, people in our industry would find that so soul-destroying. But that doesn't happen anymore. You know, we've got so many opportunities. And I think sometimes the industry, we get slightly characterized as being interested in awards or talking to ourselves. But I actually think the vast majority of people in advertising and creative agencies like to do something that's making an impact, that's the people are talking about it, people have noticed it. So when you talk to your mates, they go, oh, I've seen that. And it doesn't have to be an ad, it's something they've been aware of that you've been involved with. And we're in a much better place to be doing those things that actually have an impact rather than something that's, you know, you're just working on in gestation for 2 years. So I think what we observed was that there's a sort of cultural shift happening in the workforce of people that are going, no, I'm excited about this. And interestingly, to Ian's agenda about commercial creativity, we talk about high-performance creativity and going, that we've never had a better time when you could actually make your work perform better and actually understand what it's doing out there and actually which bits are working, which bits you can make better, which bits you release later, and basically caring about the performance of your work in a way that, you know, I remember I used to know about the performance of my work sort of when I had a tracking debrief sort of 6 months after the work had been on air. And frankly, to be honest, I'd forgotten even what the work was then. But if it was good, you kept the charts. If it was bad, you stuck it in the file and ignored it. But now you're very, very aware of how things are performing. So, I think that's very exciting. I think it's got huge challenges, and it has had huge challenges. We'll go on to have huge challenges for lots of operational things within creative agencies. Certainly, as I go back, the type of people that want to be in that world, I think, are different. But I also think operationally, there's some fundamental challenges. I think probably the biggest challenge, I think culturally, actually, might be surprised to hear this, but I think isn't actually working like that. It's actually, we've all been programmed to work as if campaigns are projects, and that you put a project into the marketplace, and actually what's behind that is all the resource is then gone. Everyone works, you know, so obviously you might have the core account team, but actually the production team, the creative team, you know, the big team that helped make that happen have gone on to the next thing. And because they're being paid to go on to the next thing, you know, because it does come back to how things are being paid for, being resourced. And I think, so we're very much, I think traditional creative agencies have been a lot of launch and leave. And that is a huge, huge cultural challenge to realise, no, when it goes out there, it's when it's starting. And therefore, creative teams aren't free to do something else. Production teams aren't free to do something else. They're actually, now it's going to get really dynamic. And I think that's a huge change for how agencies operate. So I think that's something that is a fundamental area for us to think about. I also think the thing that probably is the danger in this is to mistake thinking quantity replaces quality. And I think that's the only other thing that I sometimes watch is going, when you find yourself patting yourself on your back about how much you produced and what we did and how little it cost and how quickly we did it, and actually you're not actually good then doing the real honest thing, which is, so what did it do? So what did it, how did people actually watch it? Did they engage? You know, whatever the metrics are that you're looking at, how did it actually perform? So I think that is, again, something I feel sometimes I see people championing themselves a little bit on going, we did this, which is great. To be honest, it's great because you mean they're getting the agenda. But there is sometimes the thing about going, yeah, if it still didn't engage, that isn't value for money that you did so many films for so little money. Actually, it's really poor value for money because it didn't do anything. So I think that's something else for us to watch. I also think, is this all right, rambling?
Yeah, you got a ramble.
Okay,
I'll give you another minute.
Okay. I think the final thing about sort of working up, you know, obviously I think talking about production is a really important area, how we go about production. I think how we go about creative development is really important. And I think you know, what we found back in 2009 was we had to collapse the walls between departments. You can't, you know, we can't operate with a creative department on a creative floor, and we need to have teams much more integrated, so there's less baton passing. Everyone is clearer at understanding what the business task is and what the problem is. You don't have the time for the or I didn't quite understand that bit. So I think another piece is also making sure that we've taken down the walls between the departments, and I think that's helped us a lot.
Fabulous, thank you. Sean, we actually had as I said earlier, we've had 2 AdaptLabs already yesterday. One actually was on the whole world of programmatic, which was, for people who've been more on the creative side of the fence, was a lot of acronyms. Well, I like the acronyms. But no, just the whole area of media and real time. Fascinating. So give us your perspective on what's happening on that.
So I agree with everything that Sara and Charlie have said in the classic politician's point of view, but the challenges a media agency faces are very similar to the challenges a creative agency faces, and we face the same challenges with our clients that Sara will with her agencies. And I guess the most important thing that I see Agile being is an opportunity to change the culture of the agency. So looking at how we resource our teams, how we employ people, the types of people that we employ, the structures that we put in the organisation, the processes that we use. And I guess for us, it's a bit of a journey that we're on, and some things are working, some things aren't, and that's kind of a core principle of Agile. But sometimes I find it a lot easier to talk about what Agile isn't, to try and define it, because it's a word that is used quite a lot, and it's got a lot of misconceptions around it. Agile certainly isn't easy. It takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a lot of energy to change. And to your point earlier, Ian, it's built on a foundation of trust between 2 parties. The client and the agency have to have a really solid relationship to embark on that, and they need to be fully committed from both sides to be able to go into it. And that, is the same within an agency as well. You look at the kind of client-facing people and the delivery or the creative people, they've got to be in it together, and they've got to be really tight. And one of the core principles of Agile is having small, tight teams that operate together as a group. Also, Agile isn't fast at all. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It's more about adapting to external stimuli. And I think the Oreo example is fantastic. Their 100-day campaign was a brilliant example of that. But you've got to be realistic that that's not for everyone. It takes a lot of commitment, a lot of time, a lot of energy to deliver something like that. And that's not always right for every situation, but that doesn't mean you can't be agile in the way that you approach working with a client and delivering marketing campaigns. I guess the other thing is that it's a long-term process. I don't think that it's something you can just apply on one project and then move on and do something slightly differently. You've got to commit for a period of 1 or 2 years, I believe, to that change, to that journey with the client and as an organisation before you're going to start seeing the kind of real benefits. And into what you were saying earlier about the kind of average lifespan of a client's relationship with an agency or the length of time that a marketing director is in a job, that is a real challenge right now. And I think, Agile is something that has been talked about quite a lot. It comes from the software industry. It's been very, very successful there. But when you look at the software industry and you speak to people who have applied Agile and tried it, they've realised that it is one option and it's not always right. And I think that's really, really important. And for us, I think that we've realised over the last 6 months of trying to move to a more agile model that it's not fit for purpose for everything, but there are some core principles within an agile mindset that absolutely are necessary for today's marketing environment. So from simple things like having daily stand-ups, so sitting with your team on a daily basis and discussing what is going on in the wider world, what's happening in terms of measurement of the campaigns that you're running, what your consumers are talking about, is absolutely essential for running an agile process. You mentioned earlier that you do something very, very similar. At Havas, we've set up something called a social newsroom, which is confined to social, but is a good example of how we do it. And a small team get together at 9 o'clock every morning on a client's business. They look at what's happened on social the day before. They look at the broader news agenda, and then they adapt and they react to things. And you see that Oreo example keep coming back to, amazingly did well, is being topical really resonates with consumers. At the end of the day, this is just about how consumers see the world. And they see the world through the news agenda and headlines and what's going on in their own lives. And our job is to mirror that so that we can resonate as close as we can with the messages we're delivering. So I guess just to finish off, there are probably some unique challenges in the media world that we have to address from a structural point of view in order to move to a more fluid model. We can't live in a world where we still have to approve TV 2 months in advance. That just doesn't work anymore. And we've started putting deals together for some of our clients where we can get on air within 2 weeks. But for me, that still doesn't feel quick enough. So you look at other options, don't you? You go digital. You look at how you can generate organic views on YouTube. You look at putting digital video content out in front of a lot of people. And that brings you back to the programmatic world, which is much more real time, and you can implement things a lot more quickly. The digitization of outdoor is creating lots and lots of opportunities. That's been very London-based until recently, but is now getting a much more of a national spread. So you can get real broadcast messages out relatively quickly now. It's still not quite where we want it to be, but I believe outdoor in 4 or 5 years will be programmatic, and we will be able to treat it the same as we treat digital display. And then cinema has been digitized. You can operate much more fluidly in that environment. Press has always been very, very agile in nature because of the changing product on a daily basis, and that's why retail clients like it and use it so much. So I think the real industry that we face a challenge with right now is TV. And that structure exists for lots and lots of good reasons, but also I believe now some bad reasons. And we need to start looking at ourselves as an industry at how we can approach what is still the biggest, most important, most influential channel and change how we operate with that.
Fabulous. That brilliant 3 overviews. If I just ask a couple of questions and then open up to you guys. Just building on what you were just saying there, a couple of points. The word you used the word performance.
Yeah.
Back to sort of commercial creativity. You were sort of saying it there, and I suppose, how do you? It's easy to say what you just, because we've all done, effectiveness papers, and you actually put your econometrics in after the event, get the nice award at the end of it. But how do you really get performance, measurement into your companies? The data you get retail, how is it on an everyday? How do you structurally do that? Because it sounds tricky, right? Because I think it's easy to say, but how do you? So that word P for performance. And the second thing I want to ask all of you was really, I'll use another P, procurement and payment, right? So where does budgeting, fees, production budgets, incentives, payments, procurement, all that sort of fit into what's going on?
The performance thing's interesting because traditionally we've looked at clients' businesses and we've measured success on quite big measures like awareness or consideration, things that are tracked on a month-by-month basis by a panel, and you only get visibility of 6-7 weeks after the fact. And what we're finding is that you need to start moving to a different measurement model. You need to look at more digital-based measurements, and if you can find proxies for those old traditional measures, then that's great, but I wouldn't always rely on that either. You need to find new measures for this new world. And I know there was a session yesterday on that, and it's something that we're spending a lot of time looking into. I don't think anyone's got the right answer yet, because there is so much data out there. Trying to find the good stuff is really difficult, and trying to find how to present it in a meaningful way is still a massive challenge. But it is definitely an area that needs a lot of work, because there is no point in trying to adapt if you don't know what you're trying to adapt to. And I don't think it's easy to get that clear view of essentially what the consumer thinks of what you're doing and what's going on in their world. Because we're getting through it, but we're still based in a very panel-based measurement world, because we haven't quite got a handle on all of the data at our fingertips.
Charlie, is it just how?
I think you put your finger on something incredibly difficult for agencies. And I don't think it's because people don't want to know how things perform. I think that's not true. I think it's they don't know what they're looking for, and so I think the next big cultural shift that I hope we're about to make is where we're trying to get to start is that every account should have a performance model. So have a model for how you think it works, what you expect different things to do, how it all connects, everything you're doing. What is the purpose of each piece of activity, and therefore what would you expect to work as a result of that? So we're trying to do on every account things called performance models, which actually structure everything. I think that's the first place, because then you go, because then you don't even know what you're looking for. What is a good number? You know. So I think you have to start, and I think that's something which most strategists these days are excited about and into, and understand different channels and etc. So I think that's the first. But I then think there's a piece which is where we want to get to, and we've actually got a partnership with the data business in-house permanently to do this purely for us, is to get performance dashboards on every piece of business. So that what we want to get to is a screen, and we've started this on one account, and in fact a lot of what the British Airways pitch was about this as well, was actually so you understand, you know, literally every day, but more often than that really, but how things are performing, and therefore how you optimise stuff, and actually understanding what numbers matter to the people in the team. So that's the next, to me that's the next piece, and I think that's fascinating, because I think people will then go, and the challenge is not to make it, without being rude, a Millwall Brown debrief on a screen, because no one's going to take any interest. Yeah. So it's got to be done in a way that's fascinating. People are fascinated by the right numbers and seeing that, and it's an investment and blah, all that stuff. But that is where you have to get to.
Sara?
I think it is really challenging, and I think part of the difficulty is some of the measures that are still the most important are things like, well, we know are things like trust and consideration, which take a long time to move, and you can only measure in a. So part of the challenge I think I have internally is finding data points that can satisfy the thirst for a quick answer when you know that the real answer isn't going to come for months, years. And I think the other danger, I think, is that there's too much data. I mean, we have it, you know, if I wanted to, well, we do look at over a third of the payments in the UK across Barclays and Barclaycard. I mean, you could spend forever just wallowing in that information, or that visits the website, or what 15 million customers are doing on their accounts in a day. And actually, it doesn't really help you very much at all. And so singling out something that people can almost have a sense of progress with, and the things that are important, that are influencing customer behaviour, but holding on as well to the longer term measures is kind of the balance, because otherwise I think you get very distracted and change things, because the data this week says this, and you turn left, and then next week it says something else, and then it rained and it went back to the other one, and you know, you get very lost in things that actually don't really matter. But it's hard. Not as hard as the second P question that we're all nicely avoiding.
We'll ignore that one so far.
Yeah, exactly. Which I'd like to have a crack at starting.
Yeah, why not?
Which I think is really different. I think it's one of the areas where marketeers and agencies really need to work together on changing models of working. And ironically, sometimes I have a huge hankering to go back to commission, because it used to be really simple, as there was a percentage, there's this amount of money, it buys you a team, if it does well, we'll spend more media. If it doesn't do so well, you won't have had kind of inherent performance-based metric in it, and you spent an awful lot less time measuring how many bums were on how many seats for how long, which is quite frankly irrelevant. But trying to educate kind of procurement colleagues in terms of what that means, because it's very alluring to have something tangible of going, well, there are all these people and they've spent all these hours. And actually getting to the point where you go, I really don't care if it takes BBH 5 minutes or 5 months to crack something. What I care about is what's the end of it. And if they can do it faster and better, then that would be good. And if they do it slower and worse, that won't be so good for anyone. But that's a really difficult place to move to, because then how do you value it? So yes, it is quite weird to suddenly have a hankering after where the industry started. But I think it's something that we have to tackle, because I think ultimately one of the things that's kind of underlined this is partnership and team, and the kind of constancy of team is actually what you want to buy as a client is a team of talented people who you'll work with. I've got no idea what they'll do, but I know they'll be busy.
So I mean, I think exactly. I think it is the. I think. I mean, so I can remember the move from commission to fees, and you could feel. I mean, I
that
got
old?
Yes, I am. so exactly. But what I can remember, but apart from I remember the ease, which absolutely was great. But also I remember that feeling of when it was falling apart, and then the transition to a new model. And I remember even the transition to fees. Then people would also go, "What's the commission equivalent of that?" And everyone would go as if we hadn't really left behind. And to me, I feel like we're at that phase where we know we've got to go somewhere else. And in a way, interesting. I think actually, a lot of my view. I think actually what Sara said. A lot of clients are very enlightened and very trusting and much more ambitious around that than people would imagine, and go, I don't care. Here's the money for the year. If you can make margin on it, that's almost that extreme. But then you get into procurement and corporate governance and et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that's a huge challenge. I do think there are also, though, we have to recognise within this there are fundamental cost challenges that agencies have to wrestle with. So the ways we did stuff just can't get paid in the same way. So, and again, this involves clients too, but the sort of the classic creative development process, so how that worked, the production process, the production partners we use, those things, those are breaking down, and we all need to recognise that. So cost pressure exists in that place for the right reasons, and so that, to me, there are two parts of it. One, it isn't. We do need to evolve to a different place, but there is also there's something there which is we can't think that means we don't need to change quite a lot of how we operate within an agency.
Absolutely. From a media point of view?
Yeah, very, very similar, and I think the media industry is very guilty of racing each other to the bottom. And when it comes to procurement conversations, it can get very, very difficult, especially when you're in a competitive pitch situation. A lot of decisions to get through to the next round or to get into that final conversation is about the rates that you put on the table, the team you put together, and how much you're charging for it. I think there are more and more enlightened procurement people in and around the marketing industry now that recognise that agencies are in this business to run a business, to make money in their own right. What procurement people don't like is the idea that agencies are making money kind of below board and in kind of more nefarious territories. And I think the two Ps that we're talking about are actually completely related, because I think the only way to get to a better commercial model is to be very, very clear on what performance metrics are important and how us as agencies can deliver against those, because that's effectively where the client sees value. And if you are agreed on how you measure that, and if you're agreed on how you're remunerated around that, it's up to the agency how they manage their cost base to deliver against that, and to therefore manage how they make profit on that arrangement. And it's up to the client to police the performance that we're delivering on our kind of contribution to that. And that sounds like a massive oversimplification of what is a very, very complicated topic, but I do believe that if we can crack the measurement side and the performance side, then the commercial models will naturally follow. More and more conversations we're having with clients that we're true partners with are going down more of a performance-based route. We haven't done it yet, but we've talked to people about having a 100% performance-based model, which is really brave on both sides, because if you have a proper commercial structure around a performance-based model, there is massive upside for the agency, as well as massive downside. And it's difficult because procurement people traditionally want to control costs. They don't like the idea of endlessly escalating benefits back to the agency or vice versa. So it's a different mindset, and I think we need to crack the measurement solution to get there right, because the current setup of fees or commissions are very, very tricky. But where we have the best commercial conversations with our clients is where we're completely transparent about the time that people are spending on the account, where the money is going, and all of that. So I think there is a new dawn coming for media agencies, because the race to the bottom is hurting too many of the businesses, and it's eroding the value that clients see. It's becoming too commoditized, and we need to step out of that.
Okay, I mean, those are all. That's why, rather neatly, agility moves into performance, and that's why if there's one letter that is the sort of that we're focusing on is that performance word, the business model, the remuneration model, how it works for clients and agencies, how it works for marketing departments in their commercial arena, their chief exec, their finance director, you know, so it's all investment cost, all those sorts of words. And I do think, Charlie, you're saying, and you were just mentioning there, that's why I feel there is a new dawn about it.
Yeah.
So, for example, on Monday, we've got a session with ISBA. So it's the IPA with ISBA. So it's IPA representatives from media and creative agencies with ISBA procurement and marketing. Yeah? It's just to really understand, because it's a triangle, and it's making sure the marketing team are aligned with the procurement team, with the agency team. Now, it's not going to crack it, but what the whole idea of this agenda is to try things, to move the debate on, because the more you do it across the industry, the more everyone's going to have the courage to try things like you were just saying. Because it is about being brave, and you were saying about governance. You know, in a structure where you've got budgets, it is quite difficult to have something moving. Yeah, when you're an accountant, you like to have a budget, right? Suddenly you go, well, it might be that or it might be that. Tricky. So this is not easy, but if we do it across the industry and share what works, that's the principle. I suppose is what we're all trying to do.
I think that alignment is key, because I've been involved in commercial discussions where procurement haven't been involved, and I've been involved in commercial discussions where marketing haven't been involved, and both are horrendous, to be perfectly honest. And you need those three all aligned to get any kind of reasonable commercial deal done. Good,
I'm glad you said that, because that's what we're doing. So, you know, we're being pretty adaptable in our time, but I'm going to open to the floor. Questions that you guys have got for these three at the back. Just in case you haven't got a loud voice.
Hello, thanks. I thought it was interesting, Sarah was mentioning that you have an editorial board who kind of respond to stories in the public consciousness. I'd be keen to know how you define success for that piece of work. Does that team have long-term goals that they're working towards, or does the success metric change depending on what kind of stories they're responding to?
I think it goes back to this point about what are the short-term measures and the long-term ones. So their goals are the same as our marketing goals, which start very high up around trust and consideration, which are the key things that drive our business. That then flow down to, well, what are the commercial tasks we'll deliver? So how many mortgages do we want? How many people do we want to have this savings, whatever it is? So very tightly defined, and I try and make those as numeric as possible. So how many people do we want to do something differently with us, whether it's a different behaviour or buy a different product, whatever it might be. And then, so they're operating to those in that framework. So the mortgage thing, for example, will ladder up to our mortgage task, and will ladder up to our trust and consideration task. I think what I'm trying not to do actually is to put too much too early around the things that are there, because we don't know what works. So, you know, we've gone through the usual, how many likes did we get, how many this, how many that, and they're quite spurious. They're useful because they keep people at bay for a bit, because you can kind of declare success with a flag and go, look, we got 2,000 likes for this thing, isn't that great news? But it doesn't really mean anything, and that's one of the things that we need to work on. But I think the danger is if you try too hard to define that at the beginning, when you don't actually, you haven't done anything like this, you've got nothing to compare it with, you stifle doing anything. That's right. So it's a really delicate balance. I think the key thing for me is everyone being very clear about the end destination in terms of the big brand objective and the numerous business objectives, and really being able to trace back how this gets there. And then we learn, and I think, you know, what gives me heart is when we started with doing a lot more stuff in social media, a year and a half, I'm looking at Howard for every answer I look at Howard, when did I do that? A year and a half ago, we knew it was important reputationally. We didn't know how it would contribute from a business point of view. Through econometrics, we proved what it contributes from a business point of view, which builds confidence. But if we'd done it the other way round, we would never have started. So it does require a bit of a leap of faith and a willingness to experiment and then measure back, and then you know what you're measuring forward with the next thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any other questions?
To continue your adaptation theme and sort of your Darwinian sort of ideal over there, sort of the idea of natural selection requires you to have some features which work and succeed and are retained, and some which do not work and are lost. How do you think that works in the agency-client relationship, as I see it currently, which is very client risk averse, and the ability to potentially try things and for them to fail, especially with the high turnover of marketing directors and the like?
I'm getting really anxious about this.
Sorry.
Barclays, I'm reading the BBC. Barclays makes 14,000 people redundant, and everyone's sitting here telling me how.
Can before these guys answer, there was one interesting way of, I've seen one client do it, whether it works or not, I don't know. But hearing Jonathan Mildenhall talk from Coke's point of view of this 70-20-10 scenario, which is actually, there's different meanings of 70-20-10, but the idea of the budget, even your fees being attached to 70% sort of fixed, but 20% certain experiment and 10% completely experimental, allowing failure, allowing for it in your budget. Yeah, that's. I mean, everyone's trying a different way, but that's one I've heard that is being tried. Whether it definitely works or not, I wouldn't know. But that's one example of people trying that approach.
Yeah, and I think it's a good budgeting rule to try out. But for me, the answer comes in the relationship between the agency and the client, and you've got to be in a position of trust and in a partnership to even start going on this journey. And you need to have a culture where you accept that not everything is going to work. The important thing is learning. Yeah. It's not healthy to focus on success or failures. It's better to focus on what you learn.
I think it's also defining risk. So the bigger risk, as we see it, is not changing. Yeah. So therefore, what's risk-taking for us, if you reframe it that way, is very different. But I think it also comes back to this point about cost models and some of the things. So if you're paying £1 million for a television ad to be made, then that means that ad gets lots and lots of people spending a lot of time, which is why it costs £1 million. In a way, you get into this kind of, because 1 million people in the world have to approve it every side, and the pressure on it to work is immense. It's much easier if you can kind of break some of those things, and some of the things around TV airtime as well. You're kind of going, but we've got the airtime booked for 3 months. Exactly. Yeah, we have to have something. It puts pressure unnecessarily. It's much easier to take a risk when it's not £1 million in one 30-second, 60-second, however much they condensed into extending it kind of segment. And I think that's what we're learning and seeing is that's part of the break on it, is how can you make the economics of some of those things allow you to just go, well, we'll make 10 of them and 3 of them will be a bit crap and we won't use them, which is a really different mindset from perfecting this one piece of film, which is traditionally what we were all doing.
Yeah, again, I think that's what's so exciting. I think if you get this right, as you go, exactly as Sarah was saying, a lot of that cost that exists is in control. It's all in the control of, and it's lots of people at the agency side, lots of people in production companies, everybody, because naturally everybody's spending a lot of time in meetings discussing the wardrobe on that casting person, and that's money. That's money. The moment you start going, hold on, right, we're gonna trust people a bit more. We haven't got that money anyway, but we're going to trust people a bit more to just make those right calls, and so it's a lower cost risk. Then I think you're in a place where I think it's actually more enjoyable, because you do feel you're going to try stuff, and there's less pressure on everybody. And you go, well, no, we're trying this. And then it does come down to the relationship, about the trust that you have. And, of course, yes, things can happen in client-agency relationships, people come and go. But you go, well, you were all trying to do the right thing, weren't you? You were all trying to innovate. I mean, so I think that's a pretty defensible position to be in.
Okay, any more final questions?
Do you feel that attitude is seeping through on the client side in marketing departments? Do you think young marketeers are being brought up to see the world that way, and that sort of venture capitalist model of I might lose 5 times, but when I win, I'm going to win big? Is that something that you see in your department, and they're encouraged to approach the world like that?
And I think there isn't reward without taking risk for it, I think, and it's really important that you make that clear in terms of what you're kind of celebrating. And it is really hard, and it's hard. I mean, it's a big change for a bank, not just in marketing, but for us, it's a cultural change everywhere. Of you spent years telling people what they couldn't do, and compliance training on this, and who's doing, and now you're saying take responsibility for what you're doing, be more human, innovate more, you know, all of that stuff. And it is hard because you have to then change some of the reward mechanisms that exist behind that make organisations behave in a particular way. So that's the big challenge that I certainly have, is how do you do, because you can't say on the one hand take risks, on the other hand, you know, give people's pay rise, promotions, bonuses, whatever it is, based on them having not done that.
Absolutely.
And that is hard. But I think it's also working out how you can give the right degree of freedom, to Charlie's point, so that you're clear about what the North Star is that you're all aiming for, but then let go on there are lots of different paths to get there. You decide, you make your minds up, because that's how we're going to move faster, and that's how you'll get innovative thinking in there. But I mean, none of this stuff that we're talking about is easy, and we're on a massive journey here. So we've, you know, when I talk about the editorial board, we're now on our third, I'm looking at Howard again, and Howard says to a number of, you notice I go to my media agency, it's a number, Howard must know. But we're on our third iteration of that, because when we first tried it, we kind of knew we wanted one, and we called it one, but it was really the status meeting that we always had on a Tuesday morning by a different name. and honestly, we kind of came, this doesn't really feel like an editorial board. And then we had the blinding flash of realisation that maybe if we had someone with editorial skills running this board, i.e. an editor and a writer from our content agency, maybe that would work better. And actually, this is not just about using jargon and language, because that won't change it. It is fundamentally going, how do you change structures and reward bases? Because that's the only way.
That's one thing. Do you see your sort of social media digital world as a sort of beta channel for you to try things and?
Yes, but we also see our real world as that. So quite often, so it isn't just confined to we'll have a go in social in a little kind of contained community. We do, you know, we're piloting. The branches in Asda's, for example, at the moment, 7 of those up and running. So those are real physical branches, very different from any branch you've ever seen before, open the same hours as Asda open, you know, completely different. So it's not just and I don't think you can just make this as about digital experimentation. It needs to be who you are and the culture.
Okay, last question.
Hi. We've talked a lot about how agility benefits agencies and clients, and I wondered if you have a sense of where Barclays consumers have most felt the benefits of that agility. So whether it's in the way we've been able to target consumers more accurately, or whether it is being able to see, you know, a Barclays point of view editorially on something that's going on in the news, or pop-up branches that feel like they've happened quickly to consumers, or where you think consumers consciously feel benefit.
I think from a marketing point of view, because there are two answers to that. One is from a banking point of view and how you know, new technologies make it easier to bank. But I think from a marketing point of view, it's being able to see the influence of your voice. So we've there's social work. The social work sounds wrong. The social media work that we've done. That there is actually a social work component to this too, of constantly asking for feedback and then replaying that feedback back as things that we have changed in the business. I think really shows that benefit in action and live around big things and small things. I mean, that said, obviously, whilst a lot of people are changing the way they bank with us in the same way they're changing their shopping habits and every other business in this, there's obviously a whole generation who find that much harder. So the real issue is how do you balance not leaving people behind and helping people participate in the digital revolution. But whilst kind of being at the cutting edge for people who are pushing you to change faster. And that for a scale business is the really difficult bit at the moment of change, because you're effectively running your 325-year-old version of Barclays and your brand spanking new version at the same time, and that's a really difficult moment to be in the same way as agencies. You're being pushed by us to be more agile and produce more things, but being paid in a way that's, you know, bums on seats. So, you know, that, I think we're all in that just right in the crux of change, which is why this is so hard. Okay, fabulous. Right, I'm going to move on to the next section.
Thank you, you three, very much. Much appreciated. A round of applause, I think they get for that one.